Hey Tony, it is Friday, and first off, to answer your question of the week, we already kind of talked about it, but that punishment has been vetoed by my bosses, so you'll have to come with a different one. So what I want to talk about this week is actually I want to talk a little bit about Avatar: The Last Airbender, because it's been a little bit since we talked about it, and I ended up finishing up the show today. Now again, I've watched that show many, many, many times, all the way through several. And this time was kind of interesting because this was probably my fourth or so time watching all the way through it. And I have to say, I really enjoyed it because I got to appreciate the art more than just the story itself, and also appreciate some of the areas where like foreshadow and stuff. Like I remember one of the complaints that some people had after the finale was that the energy bending and the giant lion turtle kind of came out of nowhere, but that's actually not true. When I ended up watching through, I saw as early back as the library, even before, you had references to the giant lion turtle and different ways of bending. So I thought that was kind of I really appreciated it more this time than I did last time. It also just got me to think all about the cinematography of it. And as you know, I've mentioned before, I really enjoy cinematography. I'm by no means a connoisseur, but I do enjoy it. And I can say that watching it this time through, I was really able to appreciate all of the cinematography of the show. Now, it's an animated show, so it's not the same as like a live action movie or something like that. Well, live action movie. But it was still really cool to see. And I think particularly what I enjoyed the most was seeing the growth from season one to season three with the animators. Particularly like I remember season one, everything was kind of, you could tell they were still kind of fresh. People weren't super like the artists weren't super familiar with what they wanted to do yet, and you could see some of the animations were a little stiff, particularly early on in season one. A lot of the animations are pretty stiff. Like I noticed it most in the pilot, in which you're like, okay, they really grow as artists just throughout the first season. But then when you get to like season three, and particularly like the finale, when you have the Fire Nation ships flying through, and the way the 3D animation is portrayed along with the traditional animations or the animation style that they used, you could just go, wow, that was so cool. I also, during Azula and Zuko's final fight, I really got to pay attention to even more of the colors, the color changes and the color differences, because obviously Azula's fire is blue and Zuko's is orange. And there's a pretty great thread I'm sure you saw about why Azula's fire is blue, and I'll share it to you at some point. But it's a pretty good fan theory that I enjoyed. But just watching the animation in that final fight between Zuko and Azula is really cool, because you see like the fires hitting each other, you see the clash of colors, and you see off in the distance the colors kind of exploding as well. And you also notice it when Aang's in the Avatar state and fighting the Fire Lord, because you really get to see just how much the artists grew during that time. Now, obviously, like it's considered to be a classic show, and it's one that you and I grew up watching. I think we've watched more episodes of Avatar than most other shows that came out around the same time. Like maybe SpongeBob might be able to put a light to that one, but none I think really had the same impact on you and I as Avatar did, considering that it came out in the early to mid 2000s, and now 15 years later. Yeah, because I want to say it came out in like 2006, so 2005, 2006, somewhere around there. So like 15 or so years later, we're still talking about it, and it really had a great resurgence when it went on to Netflix. And I thought it was really cool to kind of introduce it to a whole new audience. So I have two really close friends who have an 18-month-old daughter, and they were marathoning through Legend of Korra, even though it's not on Netflix yet, because they had never seen it. And their daughter ended up watching it and started to do the same bending arts during the intro, which I just think is just so cool. Like it's a cool thing to see Avatar start to transcend generations, And I'm really hoping that it will continue because it's a classic show and it's a great show that shows the reality of war. It discusses genocide in a really mature way. It discusses disabilities in a mature way. And I know for a fact that I grew from watching it back then and still today. And I really hope that it continues. I hope it becomes a show that I show my kids, that you show your kids, and that people our age will show their children. And I think that's pretty cool. And I really hope that it becomes a big thing in the future because it's just such a beautifully crafted show. The all the characters are really good. Like there's the character growth is fantastic, and you have particularly like Zuko's redemption arc is one that's constantly portrayed as like one of the best redemption arcs in television, and I have to agree. Like, because you can't say anything but other than Zuko's the antagonist in the first season. Then by season 3, he becomes one of the heroes. He really becomes one of the protagonists, and I always liked that. I liked how in season 1 Zuko was the antagonist. In season 2 he was the duotagonist, and then season 3 he was still the duotagonist, but was portrayed in even more of a light than he was in season 2. And I think that's fantastic, and I really hope that it becomes a big show in the future that transposes generations. So Tony, my question for you is, what is your favorite part about Avatar: The Last Airbender? Tony, I'll see you on Wednesday. Later.